This is Mark Gun Media.
Hit it!
Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm your host, Mark Gunn. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and not necessarily reflective of anyone or any entity associated with this broadcast. This episode brought to you by Before Your First Gig, an audiobook written by Steve Dustcircle and produced by Mark Gunn Media. If you're a beginning musician, this is a primer that you'll definitely want to hear. Tips and strategies for setting yourself up for live performances and paid gigs. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Available now on iTunes, Audible.com, and Amazon. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Produced by Mark Gunn Media. This episode. Message to the Black Man in America, with apologies to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Quote, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time." End quote. James Baldwin. It's that rage and a few other things that we need to talk about in this episode. Brothers, we are at war. It's a war that's been waged for the last 400 years. Ever since the very first 19 of you were kidnapped and forcibly brought to these shores 4 centuries ago this month.
Black people who were brought to this country were stripped of their names, language, culture, religion, God, and taken totally away from the history of themselves. Here are 30 million people who don't wear their own names. They wear your names. Who don't speak their own language. They speak English, which is not their language. They never were allowed their own cultural expression of Africa. Don't you realize that when you turn a people upside down and inside out, then sell them and deny us the human right to know, to read a book, to learn, to understand, and then you allow us into the church, but by that time, you've painted Jesus white, God white, the angels white, and then all these black people have been subjected to a form of white supremacy, which produces in the reverse a black inferiority.
It's a war that continues to see our very humanity questioned in the most obscene ways.
Ota Benga, a Congolese pygmy, was displayed at the Bronx Zoo in New York City in 1906 and was forced to carry around orangutans and other apes while he was exhibited alongside them. Several indigenous people and African and Asian races were often caged and displayed in a makeshift natural habitat.
Everything from being put in cages to our women being raped, our children stolen from us and then sold. It's not so funny that in 2019, kids are still being snatched away from their families and being put in cages. Think about it. Generations of us fighting the same battle.
The Nixon campaign in 1968, the Nixon White House after that, had 2 enemies, anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities.
Tactics have changed, but the goal remains the same.
Stop and frisk. It's a controversial police tactic. It has been ruled unconstitutional, but despite the public outcry against it, many say innocent minorities are still being targeted.
From 2002 to mid-2013, New York City police reported making nearly 5 million stops.
I don't sleep until he comes home, quite frankly. And I know he is not in cuffs or in anybody's morgue. The fact that it happens just about every single day is overwhelming and can lead you to lose your head. But then your future ends.
Now, I'm not going to go into a history lesson because, frankly, this episode isn't about that. Besides, I don't need to tell you what you already know. What I do want to talk about, though, is the toll that this 400-year battle has taken on our forefathers and the toll it continues to take on the rest of us. I can tell you firsthand that fighting racism as a black man is exhausting, mentally and physically. There's a seething rage that I feel every time I see a news report, a social media article, or have a real-life encounter dealing with America's racism. Imagine millions of us going through the same battle day after day after day. It has a cumulative effect that's extremely hazardous to our health.
What she said was blatantly, patently the definition of racism.
Roseanne Barr tweeted this: Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby equals VJ.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Words have power. Racist words or statements like these over time can impact a person's mental and physical health.
It is just as painful as if you had been in a physical attack.
Dr. Anita Thomas is a clinical psychologist who says being subjected to racist statements or acts over time can lead to chronic stress and stress-related illnesses.
In short, the trauma of racism is killing us in more ways than one.
We, more than any other group, are not getting the help that we need,
so the
and not getting the help that we deserve.
Good point. So the results of being depressed stands out because it's untreated.
Exactly. So I think the question that comes up is, why won't black men seek help? We have a problem in reaching out to get the help that we need. I think there's a more basic way that we can understand depression. Depression is not normal sadness. One way I think we ought to think about this is that you really, truly don't feel like you are your normal self. I think all of us have a sense of, who we are, what we like to do during the day. Some of the other things a person ought to look at: trouble concentrating, overeating, undereating, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, not enjoying the kinds of things that you typically do. For most of us walking around, if you're feeling like you're in significant emotional pain, that is the time for us to get over, as men, whatever it is that's holding us back from getting help and getting to a qualified professional person, either a primary care physician, social worker, or a psychologist, who can walk you through the assessment to figure out whether you really are clinically depressed.
And there is the crux of our problem. Why won't we, as black men, seek help? Several reasons, and all of them rooted in the way that we've been conditioned by this society, both black and white.
What happens for a lot of individuals is that they suffer in silence. In the greater society, there's certainly a lot of stigma associated with mental illness. It's sort of antithetical to the American ethic, which is to be strong and courageous, to pull yourself up by the bootstrap, to weather the storm.
Stop me if you've heard this one. We don't see no damn psychiatrist. That's some white people.
Within the black community, that ethic about what it means to be strong and courageous is particularly pronounced because of trying to, combat those forces like discrimination or racism. It just adds to the burden of, sort of what it means to survive. And so then the person who's struggling with the mental illness is perhaps not embraced or, warmly accepted because of their struggles.
Or how often have you been told to suck it up? You're tougher than that.
From a historical perspective, there's been a lot of emphasis in the black community, particularly in black families, on keeping your problems close to the vest in the home. You don't share what's going on with outsiders. No one can treat you as best as your family can. You bring all your burdens and your problems to your family.
Or how about the fear of being perceived as the angry black man? I have to ask, why? The worst part, and some of this might piss off some of my Christian friends, is this whole having to be forgiving load of crap. We as black men, black people in general, have been far too forgiving for far too long. Bottom line, we are being attacked on many different fronts, and because we feel we have to emotionally keep ourselves in check, translation, not go off on anybody that offends you, we're suppressing emotions that are leading to a form of undiagnosed mental illness. There have been studies that show that because of the trauma of slavery, Jim Crow, and ongoing institutionalized racism, in quite a few cases, we suffer from a form of PTSD. Now, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who've experienced or witnessed traumatic events such as a natural disaster, serious accident, war, combat, rape, or any other violent personal assault. Psychologists have been arguing to have the definition expanded to include the effects of slavery and overall institutional racism. They cite the repeated exposure to police shootings of unarmed black people, domestic terror attacks by white supremacy groups, and the everyday racial assaults that we face, minor and major. The black experience in America has always been filled with the trauma of physical and psychological violence. And if we're being completely honest, not all of the trauma that we deal with is brought on by white America. Some of us are just as culpable and complicit in our own self-destruction. In addition to the ongoing work of saving our communities, we need to change the way that we deal with white America and each other. For the sake of our own well-being, when it comes to racial politics, we have to say enough is enough.
There comes a time and a point when you are black and you are tired of accommodating whiteness. It reaches a point when you are black and you're tired of having the bass out your voice.
That's right.
You're tired of not being able to show actual anger in the workplace because it's a white woman.
Come on.
And, you can't cuss a white woman out.
Come on, bro.
You're tired of, I gotta wear a suit. Story that I read, brothers who wear suits in New York and they carry the Wall Street Journal around. So if somebody white sees them with the Wall Street Journal, then they go, oh, he's one of them or one of us. He's not a threat.
That's right.
There comes a time and a point where you are black. You are tired of accommodating whiteness.
That's right.
Where you're tired of making them feel good. And you're tired of having to pull yourself back and change your hair, and change your dress, and change your tone.
As I continue to tell white America, racism is the dump that you took on the floor that is this country. You clean it up. We have to stop being so concerned with the way that others deal with our open expressions of anger and hostility. Holding it in is killing us. Coming up, we have to deal with the way that we deal with each other. We've got more about that right after this. Before Your First Gig, an audiobook written by Steve Dustcircle and produced by Mark Gunn Media. If you're a beginning musician, this is a primer that you'll definitely want to hear. Tips and strategies for setting yourself up for live performances and paid gigs. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Available now on iTunes, Audible.com, and Amazon. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Produced by Mark Gunn Media. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshot Straight from the Hip. This episode, we are dealing with the trauma of racism and how we are finally starting to look at its effects on our mental health. Now, before the break, I was talking about how we as black men need to adjust the way that we actually deal with each other. Now, we don't deal with our emotions and anger in a way that's healthy because of a perceived lack of resources. We don't seek out counseling because of a historically justified mistrust in the medical profession.
In July of 1972, the Washington Star newspaper broke the story about the controversial Tuskegee Institute syphilis experiment. For 40 years, from 1932 until 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service, in partnership with Tuskegee, secretly studied the effects of untreated syphilis in African American men in Alabama. 600 black men, 399 with syphilis and 201 without the disease, were induced to participate in the experiment. Nearly all of them were poorly educated, impoverished sharecroppers. In exchange for participating, they were promised free medical exams, hot meals, and a burial stipend. The men with syphilis were not told they were infected and were not treated, even after penicillin was discovered to be an effective cure for the disease in the 1940s. Over the course of the experiment, 128 participants died of syphilis or syphilis-related complications. In 1972, when the paper exposed the details, the experiment was still ongoing. It incited public outrage over the unethical treatment of the participants, which led to the experiment's termination that November. The following year, the NAACP filed suit on behalf of the survivors. The federal government settled the lawsuit for $10 million. It also agreed to provide survivors and their infected family members with free medical services.
And the cultural ignorance of quite a few medical health practitioners. However, we've had a resource in place all along. We just didn't know it.
For black men, the barber shop is not just a place where you get your hair cut or your beard trimmed. No, it's much more than that. Historically, the barber shop has been a safe haven for black men. It's a place where we go for friendship, solidarity, and solace. It's a place where we go to get away from the stress. It's a place where we don't have to worry about how we're being perceived by the outside world. It's a place where we don't feel threatened. It's a place of loyalty and trust. For that reason, it's one of the few places where we can fearlessly be ourselves and just talk.
Now, you hear discussions about having safe spaces, right? Well, the barber shop has been ours for years.
Minute or something left in the game? That was a game.
For the 15 or 20 minutes it takes to cut someone's hair, the barber and customer open up to each other about their own lives.
You know, you might have a problem, I might have a problem. We sit and
communicate amongst each other.
Yeah, communicate.
And now more mental health professionals are seeking our sacred space and using it as a means of providing the services we most definitely need.
Black men work better in groups, for one. Normally, we're not interested in going to a psychologist or a doctor to talk about our problems, but what we will do is go to the barber shop, and we'll tell our barber everything from our financial, relationships, all those things happen in the barber shop. So that's why it's important to now take mental wellness professionals, put them in this environment so we can really create solutions for our community.
Now, quite a few of us just want to get a good fade and a close shave. We still may not feel comfortable in sharing what's going on in our personal lives. Now, when it comes to the constant battle against racism, we almost don't have a choice. And if we're going to just be black while being black in this society, we need our brothers to lean on each other now more than ever for emotional and mental support. Now, here in Kentucky, there's an organization called the Minority Mental Health Project that you can find out more about through their Facebook page. Personal experience. Now, I was caught in the crossfire of a double homicide several years ago, and it's something I still can't quite shake to this day, so I don't talk about it a whole lot. Having a level of self-awareness, I knew after the fact that I needed to get help because I was suffering from PTSD. Watching someone die right in front of you it will do that to you. Nightmares, looking over my shoulder, a feeling of not being safe anywhere. I was emotionally crippled. Now, as a radio personality at that time, I went from being absolutely fearless on a stage in front of 60,000 people to being absolutely terrified of being in a nightclub with just a few hundred. To add to that trauma, I forced myself to stay away from the people I loved most because I was being threatened for wanting to testify against the murderer who changed my life forever. I was lucky in that I found a therapist who was culturally aware, and together we were able to process every raw emotion I felt for months after it all happened. Now, like I said, I don't talk about this a whole lot because of the fear of bringing up old memories. However, I have learned to compartmentalize those feelings and can look at them somewhat objectively now. Question being, am I all right? Well, yeah, to a certain extent. However, I know that I have been changed forever, and it's those changes that I'm still learning to deal with, and this is almost 10 years after the fact. Now, I say all that to let you know that this just isn't an intellectual exercise, this topic for me. It is very personal. Now, before I sidetracked, I was talking about how we needed to adjust the way that we as black men deal with each other. Now, the irony of it all is that there are things that we already do as a part of our culture that, if tweaked just a little bit, could go a long way in showing the kind of mental and emotional solidarity that we need. How many of my brothers give a head nod to other brothers you see on the street, even if you don't know them? I make a deliberate effort to do this no matter where I am. It makes me feel good to get that acknowledgement from another black man. But what if we were to tweak that just a little bit by offering a quick pound or handshake in passing? Maybe even saying, yeah, bruh, I see you. just as an acknowledgement. That simple act alone, if seen often enough, is a show of strength and unity among us. Now, I remember back in the day when we referred to each other as brother or black man. More recently, king or prince for our younger brothers. What if we could bring that back? Again, it's something that I deliberately do, so much so that I get asked if I know the person that I just spoke to. More often than not, I don't, but we are bonded by 400 years of generational trauma. Finally, the one thing that I've been blessed to grow old enough to see is us as men going from merely shaking hands when we greet each other to actually hugging it out. Those that know me know what I'm talking about. That one thing we got right, so we shouldn't stop doing it. Now, I know that there are some women listening to this who go through the same struggle that we do. Trust me, sisters, this isn't about slighting you in the least. There's an entirely different conversation that needs to be had at another time. Now, I chose to do this for us as black men because we are the most hated and most feared on the planet. And I simply refuse to let others' cowardice cost me my mental health or that of my brothers. You can kind of think of this as a million-man talk. However, I do strongly encourage you to listen to this with the men in your lives so that you can get a better understanding of us. By the way, do you know how far a simple, gentle touch on the shoulder can go with us? Sometimes that's all we need for strength. At any rate, during the course of doing research for this particular episode, I ran across a wonderful poem by a young man by the name of David Anthony Butler. It perfectly captures our struggle and pain when it comes to the task of just being black. I'm going to share that with you right after this. If you're an advertiser, one of the most important things about getting your message out is actually standing out from the rest of the crowd. If you're listening to this program right now, this is where you'd hear your commercial. As an exclusive sponsor of Gunshots Straight from the Hip, your commercial is professionally produced and gets a longer shelf life based on your needs. Gunshots Straight from the Hip is a unique and compelling program unlike anything else in the marketplace. Episodes are available for download on iTunes, TuneIn, and MarkGunMedia.com. And depending on how you tailor your message, the potential for new and repeat customers is that much greater. Best of all, it's extremely cost-effective. If you'd like more information on how you can be a sponsor of this broadcast, call Mark Gun Media Inc. at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Or log on to markgunmedia.com. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. This episode, Message to the Black Man in America with apologies to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, we've been talking about black men and the relationship between racism and our mental health. Now, I was telling you about a poem I came across while doing research for this particular episode, and it perfectly captures the essence of what we've been talking about. The poem is called My Black Anger, and it's by David Anthony Butler. Gather round, take a knee, listen and hear my stories of sorrow and my own trail of tears. What is it they don't get, I wonder? What is it they can't understand? That all lives do matter, but yet they don't for a black man. How do I appropriately display my black anger in a way that doesn't breed hate? How can I adequately portray my frustration in a way that the majority can relate? How can they even begin to understand a life lived in just one day? To wake up so mad at the world and yet have to put that anger away. Go to work, black man. Put on your suit and tie. Smile in the face of the white man. Be respectful. Be polite. All while hiding the anger inside, wondering if you're sacrificing your pride, because you know that doing things right doesn't really matter. You're still likely to die. Take a knee, young man. Listen to my tales of being black in a world systematically set up for you to fail. What could I possibly say that they don't already know? It's all over the news. It's all that they show. And yet somehow you'll still find ways to make just that this was a black man that no one could trust. You demand our patriotism to a country of the free that enslaved us to trade us. We the people. Who are we? We weren't part of the Constitution. Our rights weren't included. The national anthem wasn't written for us. It's just words. It's just music. Bombarded by opinions, words with no action, I find solace in the shadows and silence their satisfaction. You can log off from the web, but I can't log off from life. The days will continue on. My black anger I'll have to fight. Take a knee, young man, and observe the world you see. Standing for what you believe is hard, but not standing seems harder to me. Where can I place my black anger? Where can I bury this rage? Where can I harness this feeling that I spill onto the page? You can't understand the fences of an August Wilson in play, nor adapt to the reasoning of why a caged bird sings. How to explain oppression to the unoppressed, like a rainbow to the blind, or make the deaf understand pain if they can't hear a mother crying? What do I do with this black anger, this heavy burden that I bear? What do I do with my black anger when I say that they don't care? Take a knee, young man, such a deathly weight to uphold. Being black is so beautiful, and so cold. Once again, that was Black Anger by David Anthony Butler. It's a poem I ran across while doing the research for this particular podcast. And as I said earlier, the fight continues, but as fathers, grandfathers, brothers, sons, and uncles, we're no good to our families unless we're good to ourselves. That's why taking care of ourselves is so important. So if you or someone you know needs help, call 1-800-273-8255. That's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741 for free 24-hour support from the Crisis Text Line. And once again, check out the Minority Mental Health Project's Facebook page for more information. You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and not reflective of any business entity or anyone associated with this broadcast. If you have any comments or want more information on how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call us at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.